everyone, it's Lindsay and welcome to our DIY Dutch Colonial. In today's episode we're going to show you 2 ways to paint a door. Rob is going to show you how to spray a door and I'm going to show you how to paint a door by hand if you don't have a paint sprayer. But before we dive in, let's talk about what kind of paint you should use. So I would recommend using, if you're using an interior paint for an inside door, that you use one that's in maybe a satin or semi-gloss finish. That way you can wipe down the doors very easily. If you are painting an exterior door, you should use an exterior paint, one that is more durable and can withstand the elements. If you're unsure of what kind of paint to use, I would recommend going to the hardware store or your paint store and asking what they would recommend. So we're gonna start off by prepping the door. If you know me very well, I don't like doing a lot of prep work because I'm lazy and I just like to put the paint directly on whatever we're painting. But there are a few steps, 4 steps to be exact, of how you should prep a door or a surface before you start painting. So the first step is you're gonna want to clean the door. I usually don't clean things before I start painting them unless they're filthy. And in this case, in this house, it was vacant for a while and so the doors were quite filthy. And so when I first came through the house and did a lot of cleaning, I actually wiped down all the doors with bleach. And then usually before I paint a door, I also use something called crud cutter, and it is a deglosser. So because I'm lazy, that means I don't have to sand the door. You can sand the door if you want, but it gets dusty and it's a mess. Crud cutter does kind of break through that glossy finish and it kind of sands it for you in a way. So just follow the instructions on the bottle, but it's gonna have you scrub the door. It's kind of like soap, and then you rinse it off, let it dry, wait till it's completely dry before you start painting, and it's going to remove some of that glossy finish. And that's gonna help your paint to adhere much better, more strongly to your door. So the next step is to fill any holes in your door. You can fill it with wood filler, caulk, or spackle, or maybe something else if you have a metal door. Once again, you can ask someone at your hardware store if you're not sure what to use. In this case, our doors did not have any holes that needed to be filled, but also if you have gaps in your molding, you can also fill those with caulk, and that's going to help make a much cleaner finished look in the end. So the third step is to remove all of your hardware. I know Rob likes to take the door off the hinges and he likes to take all the hardware off the doors. I don't like to do that, 1, because I'm not strong enough to take the door off by myself, and 2, because I'm lazy and I don't want to take the time to take all the hardware off the door. So it does make painting easier if you do remove everything, but if you don't want to, you can just paint around it, or you can use painter's tape to tape off any of the hardware that you don't want to get paint on. And the 4th step is to protect your surroundings. And so I also don't really do this step. I just paint and I don't necessarily lay things down first. But if you are spraying the door like Rob was, he took the door down and he put it in our spray area so that paint wouldn't get all over the walls. But you can also lay a drop cloth down or plastic underneath your door if you're just hand painting it like I was, just to prevent any drips from getting on your floor.
Here are the steps to spray a door. I am not good at applying paint evenly, so I like using rollers or paint sprayers because they do that for me. I know Lindsay has a very steady hand. She has her art background. She's able to use a brush very well, but I like using something else that applies it. It does apply it thinly though, so you may have to do different coats. And because I bought a cheap paint sprayer and I didn't add paint thinner, it would occasionally get gummed up and I need to stop and I need to clean it out. The first step would be to find a good location to spray the door in. You don't want to do it here. It would make a mess. And then I hung it up with wire to the ceiling so it was hanging. I hung it from the rafter, 1, because it looked cool, and then 2, because it allowed me to spray both sides of the door at the same time. And I can get coverage just one time around, with the exception of the top and bottom of the door, but you're never going to see those. There's no point in even painting. Or respirators, because you don't want to breathe these little paint molecules in. I added paint to the paint sprayer, and depending on the instructions for the paint sprayer, I'd add a little paint thinner or water. But in this case, I didn't do any of that. And I just sprayed once up and down, and then I put a second coat on, spraying left to right. And it's kind of funny, as I'm telling you guys what I did, I noticed a little spot that I probably should have hit a 3rd time. After everything was set and I let it dry for, and I mean, it dries pretty quick because it goes on thin, so, but I let this dry for about a day. Brought it back upstairs and then put the You told me what they were a minute ago.
It's worn off.
Right, but you had
hardware.
Put the hardware back in, and then I used shims, which is wooden shims, to bring the door up. I used to have Lindsay hold the door while I would try to get the screws in. We'd always end up hollering at each other. And then one day I just put wood shims in to the level I wanted and screwed them back in and we were done.
Alright, so let's dive into the steps for how to hand paint a door like the one behind me. First step is to use a brush to paint all of the molding and all of the small details and areas that you can't get to with a roller. I like to use a nice angled brush like the paintbrush that Clare Paint sent us. It was a really nice brush. The angled brush really helps you to get into all like the nooks and crannies and crevices of the door, especially if you have one that has a lot of molding. The nicer the brush you use, the higher quality your brush is going to be, and that means that you're going to get less streaks. So I'd recommend getting a somewhat nice brush so that you can eliminate all the streaks on your door, or as many streaks as possible. You'll also want to brush the paint on pretty thinly so that you don't get globs or drips kind of going down your door as you're moving along. It is better to paint in thin, even layers. So the next step is to go over all your wide, flat areas with a small roller, and this also helps to prevent a lot of brush streaks. So if you were to paint the whole door with a brush, you would get those big, wide, flat areas, such as like right here. You would get a ton of brush strokes in there. So to prevent that, use a small roller. Once your door is completely dry with one coat, you can go over it with a second coat. Once in a while you will need a third coat, but usually 2 coats works pretty well if you have a high quality paint. And for your second coat, you're going to repeat what you did in the first 2 steps. You're going to go in with your angled brush, paint all of the trim, all of the molding, all of the small areas, and then follow up with your roller on the big flat areas. And when I do the first coat, I like to do it more for just general coverage. The second coat, I take my time to make sure that it's as even and as clean and neat as possible. So the next step, the 4th step, if you have anything taped off, any hardware taped off, remove it while the paint is still tacky. If you try to remove the tape when the paint is completely dry, it might end up chipping the paint or taking some of the paint off of your door, which you don't want to happen. So to prevent that, take all the painter's tape off when the paint is still a little bit wet. And the very last step, once your door is completely dry, you can put any remaining hardware back on the door and use the door as normal. So those were our 2 different ways to paint a door, one by spray and one by hand painting. Both ways work really well. I think that the spray door came out a lot better. It's a lot smoother. But if you don't have a paint sprayer, this is how you would paint the door by hand. Painting a door may seem very daunting. I remember the first time I painted my door, I lived in a townhouse. I'll link that video up above. I do have a video tour of my very first house, and I painted the door and I was so scared because I never painted anything in my house before. It's the first thing I painted. So I understand that it can be very overwhelming, very daunting, very confusing, but it is a low risk, it is low cost way to update your space. It is a way to add a pop of color without painting or changing an entire room. And if you don't like it, the good news is you can just paint over it and pick a different color or a different finish later. So it's low commitment. If you missed Selah's bedroom mini makeover, we will have that linked above in the cards and down below in the description box. That is the room that we painted both of these doors in, so you can watch that video to see how it all came together in the makeover. We hope that you enjoyed these tips and these 2 different ways to paint a door. We'll see you down in the comments below, and we'll see you in the next video as well. Bye.
Ready? Filming? Like it's already filming? Like right now?
Yeah.
Like you've already hit record.
Yeah.
So it's got all this. So,
can you back up? Because not like literally back, I mean back up in what you were saying.
Well, maybe I should start over. Probably should. Okay. I took the door off the hinges. I removed all of the
Hardware.
All of the thingies, all of the hardware. Thanks for coming to my channel. Remember to like and subscribe. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. That can come out. I don't know.